John, you gotta figure out how to make money in your sleep. And I said, well, what does that mean? She's like, well, if I'm not feeling good, if if I don't want to go to work, if I don't, she's like, I get paid. I'm like, how do you do that? I'm 25 years old. She's like, I own real estate and I own them in these areas, and tenants actually, they go out every day and they help pay down my mortgage, and then I get depreciation, and then I get, passive income. And I'm like, boom, 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 boom. All these lights start going off in my head.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. John Edwin. John, how are you doing today?
Heck yeah, Phil. I am feeling great. I'm even more great that I'm on your show, and I know this was a long time coming. You hit me up. I hit you up. We finally got the day has come, Phil. And I'm also looking forward to having you on my podcast. So
yeah, very soon. We're going to figure it out. It's fun to coordinate schedules all the time, but it's great to have you, John. For our listeners, John, first and foremost, man of faith, husband and father, background in strength and conditioning training, combat sports, and M&A, really interesting, had some gyms, a real estate investor, author of a best-selling book as well, and just a really cool story. You've done a lot, also executive with Accountable Equity Group. But tell us, John, just give it the backstory here a little bit. How did you've done a lot of different things, a lot of different experiences. How did we get here?
Yeah. So, I grew up in the inner city of Philadelphia, pretty rough neighborhood, which is good because it teaches you to stand up for yourself. And my father, he was an immigrant. He came here from Pakistan, born and raised in Lahore. Came in his mid to late 20s and met my mom. She was American through and through. Everything you can think of: English, Irish, German, French, that whole mix. So I look Italian, but I'm half South Asian and half Eastern European. But yeah, so also grew up with two older sisters, Sabine and Olivia, awesome siblings. And had a pretty rough kind of family life, very tumultuous, but through that, it taught me a lot of things. It taught me patience. It also taught me how to live and walk in faith. It's interesting because I grew up going to church and I kind of walked away from my faith, especially when my parents were in the middle of separating when I was 14, moved to a totally different neighborhood outside of the city, didn't know anybody. And then right before I turned 18, I really had a coming to Jesus moment. And that's where my faith became real and became my own. Along that route, when I was in 11th grade, I was 16, and my now wife became my then girlfriend. She was cheer captain of the school, and I thought, that she's like way out of my league, and thank God, she actually called my phone. We had those actual phones back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we got to talk and went to junior prom together, and never looked back. We're about to celebrate 24 years of marriage. And awesome. It's been an awesome ride. She went off to Penn State. I went to Liberty University. I was running track for them, had a scholarship. I graduated with a degree in exercise science, and then we got married at 21. And yeah, I was in sales. I did some Cutco. I sold Cutco through college, which was awesome because it taught me how to represent myself, how to sell myself. how to look people in the eye and actually have a conversation, which it feels like nowadays is less and less. These kids are looking down at their phones, or not making eye contact when they're speaking to you.
Yep.
But I learned a lot of really great social and sales skills.
Well, I just wanted to ask about sales, because you hear a lot about, I don't know what time frames, but you hear Cutco knives and you hear Xerox and the sales training programs and the importance of sales. And a lot of people think the importance of sales. I think it's the importance of interpersonal skills, not necessarily sales. And if you learn those, the other thing is, I think it does probably create the importance of courage as well, because you're going out on a limb. So I would say the interpersonal skills that you develop as a salesperson, plus those training programs, in addition to building up the courage to try new things, to go into new places. So I guess if there's someone that's maybe younger in their career and thinking about gaining experience at a corporate job, at a small business, whatever, but they're not ready for entrepreneurship yet, how important was that in shaping kind of your longer term success?
It was everything. Like, honestly, my 4 years in college didn't compare to the time that I spent working with Cutco / Vector. Vector's the parent company.
Yep.
Because of the skills that they taught me. And a lot of really successful entrepreneurs have come from selling knives through college. And, and then I moved up and I did well, taught me a lot of time management. When I was 19, I actually opened a branch office for the company as a branch manager. So then I got to, interview and hire and train other salespeople for Cutco. So can you imagine, like, all the great skills that you learn doing that? And
leadership.
Yeah. So this actually, this is a great liaison for what I'm about to mention. So I had a degree in exercise science. I was planning on getting my doctorate in physical therapy. My senior year, I did a 1-year internship, and I didn't like it at all. I was like, oh man, I've been thinking my whole college career that this is where I go, and I don't want to do this. And when Christina and I got married, she's like, we got married at 21, right out of college, and she's like, John, you should think about being a personal trainer. I'm like, oh, dude, they can't make any money. Like, what are you talking about? I can't be a personal trainer. She's like, we don't have any money anyway. So just take a shot. It's what you love to do anyway. You love to work with athletes. And so literally, like, I walked in a gym and started working as a trainer. And within a few months, I was the most sought after trainer in the Philadelphia area. And then the next 2 years, I was the top trainer pretty much on the whole Eastern Seaboard. The whole East Coast, because the company Town Sports International owns New York sports clubs, Boston sports clubs, Washington sports clubs, Philadelphia sports clubs. So there's thousands of trainers, and I was ranked number one because of the volume that I was doing right after my first year. And then I launched my own business at 25.
It's so interesting. So our kids' first day of school was this morning. And, my wife does a great job at the beginning and ending of the school year. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the reality is, even when we're 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever you were at that time, it's just hard to know. And it's so if people are making decisions for their quote rest of their lives at such a young age, and sometimes they make that decision, they get it wrong, but they stay in it and they keep doing it forever and ever. You recognized it, which is, I think, the importance of maybe having some flexibility around that early, but you totally shifted. And then, same field, right? You're still working with people with their health, but you shifted and you started to do it around, I'm sure, sales and leadership were a huge part of that. So I just think that's neat. And I just laugh because my kid, they don't know what they want to be when they grow up, really. Like, by the way, my son wants to be a Major League Baseball player. Like, I'm sorry, but if he takes on his skills after me, I'll have him talk to you, John. How about that? You can train him. Anyway, even like little kids, it's just hard for us to know. You were wise and you recognized it and you made the shift. And so as you got into personal training and really had success there, kind of what were some major, next steps or shifts as things evolved?
Well, so when we were 24, Christine was finishing her master's in elementary ed at St. Joe's, and we did not expect to start having kids at that age. I was thinking, late 20s, we'll start making some money, get get a little, comfortable financially, and then we can have kids. And we'd always talked about that Christine wanted to stay home once we started having kids. Well, we were not trying to have kids, but she was pregnant, and we had our first at
Yeah.
24. Uh, so I had to pivot really quickly because she got her master's in September and Luke was born October 10th. So it was like, okay, you're going to stay home. Now we're in a whole lot more debt and we weren't expecting this. So now I have to really step out in faith. And that's when I launched Strength Personal Training LLC. And I left the facility that I was at and negotiated a lease and fit out a space in a very, when you're in personal training, it's a luxury for people, and it's expensive. So I made sure that I was in a wealthy neighborhood of Philadelphia. It's called Old City. So I was right on the corner of a very high volume, high financial area.
Yep.
So yeah, I fitted out and I launched, and I was immediately super successful because everybody knew who I was in that area, and we kicked butt right out of the gate. And it's interesting. So when you're trading your time for money, there's a danger there because when you go on vacation, it's not the money it costs to go on vacation, it's what you're losing when you go away because you're running your own business and there's no vacation pay. There's no health insurance. You're paying that. You're paying everything out of pocket. And Luke was about one, maybe 1.5, and Christine was going to Disney World with her parents. And I said, I don't want to go because I got to stay home to make money for us. So I was a little sad in that in that time frame. And one of my clients who was very well off said, John, you gotta figure out how to make money in your sleep. And I said, well, what does that mean? She's like, well, if I'm not feeling good, if I don't want to go to work, she's like, I get paid. I'm like, how do you do that? I'm 25 years old. She's like, I own real estate and I own them in these areas, and tenants actually, they go out every day and they help pay down my mortgage, and then I get depreciation, and then I get, passive income, and I'm
Right.
like, boom, 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 all these lights start going off in my head.
Right.
So literally I went out with zero experience and bought my first house at 25, investment property, and did everything wrong.
Yep.
And and then learned to start flipping and holding and started making money in my sleep.
Yep. And I think you're just, the general story there is a perfect example of like using business to generate cash flow and income. Early on, I think in your business, you were trading time for money. Maybe that evolved over time, but you early on recognized real estate and started investing to preserve it. I want to ask though about like when you launched your business, relatively newly married, a couple of years, new son. What were all the fears with starting that? Like, you seem like maybe you just jump to action and go. So maybe you didn't think through it too much. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how much fear and anxiety was around that decision to make that leap?
I don't get anxious. I'm not saying I don't get anxious in life because, of course, certain things. Actually, it's funny. Recently, I'm 45 now, and recently, like when I have to travel, I start getting this weird travel anxiety. I had never had that before, but usually, whenever I get into something, I just jump right in. Like there was no anxiety. It was like if this doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm going to figure something out. I've always been very confident, so I'm like, well, I'm an intelligent guy. Like I can walk across the street and get a position anywhere I think I want to be at. And it doesn't have to be in personal training or gyms or whatever. I can go sell anything. So fitness is just something that I'm passionate about, and I chose. And so there was really no anxiety. I just knew I had to act fast because I was giving 50% of my income, which I was bringing in about 14,000 a month at that time in personal training, and I'm handing 7,000 over to the gym. Like I was a cash cow for those guys. And of course they tried not to let me go, but I'm like, look, I would rather go over here and pay rent and keep all that income versus fork it over because now my wife's not working.
Yep. Awesome. So pretty young age, you have your own business, you start acquiring real estate. How does this roll out over time? I mean, the next 20 years is a lot, an overnight success, if you will. But what were some of the major shifts and actions and kind of things that happen over the next several years?
Um, so initially I started buying, and then I was doing BRRRR before BRRRR was a thing. I was buying. I took a how I did it was I didn't have the money to buy real estate, so I took a line. Thank God, Christine and I bought, and thank you, Christine, because you're really the one that talked us into it. We had a bad rental experience when we first got married at 21. So at 22, we had like 7 grand in the bank, and again, this is a long time ago. We bought $100,000 little row home in Philly and went FHA, so it was 3%. So we wiped out the whole 7 grand to buy that house.
Yep.
And then within just a few short years, that house more than doubled. So I had equity. So I took a line of credit. I took a HELOC. And again, I was doing all this stuff with no instruction, no podcast, no books, just off my
Nothing,
brain.
right?
Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is, I think, the next logical thing. So I took 70 grand, bought a house for 40 grand in the ghetto, renovated it, and then this is back before the 2008 subprime fallout. So the bank now gives me 90 grand for the house.
Yeah.
It was not worth 90 grand. I knew it wasn't worth 90 grand, but they were just handing money out like crazy. So then I went and I did it again, and then I did it again, and then the crash happened, and then I'm like, I can't sell these houses because they're not worth what what my mortgage is. So I held the properties, and then that slowed me down quite a bit because I was afraid to make purchases because I didn't know exactly where the market was going to go. And then in 2010, I said, you know what, I'm going to turn around. We just started flipping. I just started flipping properties. So I'd be training, and I hired multiple contractors, contracting crews, and we started flipping for more seed money. And then that gets addictive in itself. I'm sitting with guys and I'm looking at their quote unquote horizontal income, which is passive income, and it's really high, and they're like financially free. And I was like, I had a few properties. I was, maybe 12, 13 rentals, single families, but the rest I'd been flipping. And I'm like, oh, dude, I've been doing this wrong. Like, this is not the way. So then over the last 6.5 years, my wife and I have added like 60 more rentals to our portfolio. So we're just over 70 now. And we're financially free, and then we're doing all kinds of other stuff because that time allows you to get creative and get involved in other businesses.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about just the 2008 crash, because I've talked about this before, but this is a little bit of a different way than in the past. You had both a cash flowing asset, so you're growing in your cash flow and equity when all things are going well. In 2008, your equity crashed, but I think you still had cash flow, which allowed you just
A
to hold
little.
through it.
Yeah, a little. We didn't have much cash flow because I was taking the maximum the bank would lend me because I'm like, oh, I'll take all that cash and then I'll go do it again. And then I'll take all that cash and do it again. So really the rents were just covering the mortgage at the time, because I didn't think that money was running out.
Right.
And then overnight, what happened?
Right. So maybe don't be so, you might
I
say
was
don't be
hyper
as
aggressive.
aggressive with leverage. However, the fact that you covered the debt and you had
Yeah.
enough, like not cash flow to live off of, but just positive, like $1 a month
Yeah,
during
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
tough time,
There was,
allowed you to
there
hold
was,
it until 2015, 2000, whatever timeline when the market
yeah.
did come back. So my point is, if you have a deal that has both cash flow and you expect it to grow in equity, they might not always be growing in equity, but if you have the cash flow there to protect it, you can wait until that equity will grow over time. Just hold it through it allowed you to hold it long enough for the cycle to come back.
Good friend of mine. He picked me up one day and was like, "Hey, I'm taking you to Scranton." I'm like, "Scranton, like the show, like The Office, Scranton?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm doing a bunch of projects there. It's awesome." And I was buying in Philadelphia at the time, and I was like, "Okay." Um, he drove me up there, and I was like, "Man, the equity may not go up as quickly as it does in Philadelphia,
Right.
but my goodness, the cap rates are way higher than what I'm getting in Philly. So I'm getting way more cash flow here. So over the last like 4 years, we've added 50 doors up in Scranton, and that's really created a nice cash flow for us.
That's awesome. Well, I guess from a business perspective, I want to talk about, you mentioned your kids, your wife. I want to talk about that a little bit too, because you're passionate about that. Before we do, like, is there any other, whether it's business, accountable equity, like any other kind of major shifts you made from the personal training and real estate to other business ventures or just other mindset shifts or things that kind of shifted for you?
There was all these opportunities. I had never heard of a syndication. I didn't know what a syndication was. And I see all these guys, investing as LPs and GPs and these things. And I had to go do all my homework to understand what either any of these terms are even what they mean. But at that time, I wasn't ready to be an investor in anyone else's deals because I had to double down on me. I had to make sure that my goals were first being accomplished, and then I would invest in myself. So I spent years doing that and building those passive streams of income through our personal real estate, and then over the last few years, I have been investing in other people's syndications. So that's another nice pivot where you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be, a professional in every type of career or space. Just know that a good operator in certain spaces, whether it be self-storage or whether it be, a mobile home park or whether it be accountable equity that now I'm a part of in hospitality. I never thought I'd be an investor in hospitality. But once you get these really good, guys who are doing it, have the experience in those industries, invest with them because they can really make you money.
Agreed 100%. Passive investing is something I've done. And I think different, there's so many different asset classes you can invest in, different markets, different regions. The most critical item, you said it, is just selecting the operator and being really thorough in that process is the most important part of it, in my opinion. So good stuff. Well, I want to talk about.
And hold on one other second. I love the alternative investing because you can go see your assets, right? And you can also redirect your IRA, which I've redirected multiple IRAs.
Yep.
And you can go feel and touch and smell and taste and all of that. And you're growing money with your friends. So it's all kinds of great bonuses.
Agreed 100%. I want to talk a little bit about so you have a lot going on, right? And you're still active in these different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
You can so financial independence means you can be selective about where you spend your time and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You also talked a little bit, we've talked in the past, husband and father.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me just why, I guess, what is your role? What does that even mean to you first? And then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. As we come across a lot of very successful, financially successful men and women, and conversations that come up, which I'm very surprised about many times, is that guys can get, and not just guys, by the way, but I'm just generalizing, guys can get so focused on making money, on scaling their business, and there is an addiction almost to that, right? But you can also forget about your wife and your kids, and then you can always use the excuse, well, hey, I'm working to provide a better life for my family. Well, what your family needs is time, not more money. And so, early on in my life, I made it a point that my wife and I would do a weekly date together. And that didn't have to be a night. We have three amazing kids, Luke, Sylvia, and Caleb. They're amazing. Luke's 20, Sylvia's 18, and Caleb's 16. We just dropped Sylvia last week for a freshman year at Liberty University. But every week for our entire marriage, and Christine and I will be married in October, 24 years, I have made sure that we get out some type of date, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, a walk, something, just the two of us. And then I've been really intentional about the two of us getting away by ourselves every quarter. So that could be a one night deal. It could be a weekend. It could be a week, rarely ever a week, because when you have young kids, it's hard to get away. But her parents and my parents were always really good about watching the kids and supporting us to get away, because the kids are going to grow up and they're going to move out of the house, and then you're going to be, left with your spouse, and you may not know who that person is if you're not intentional through those years.
Yep. Yeah. Well, first of all, if you've truly, a date night, or not a date night, a date And I think too many times we think about having a date means it has to be a formal, structured, go to dinner, wine, whatever. There's a lot of different ways to just spend quality time together. But the
Yeah.
fact that you've done it, I mean, 24 years, 50 plus times a year is absolutely incredible. And I think I would also make the same point, like the quarterly getaway. I think a lot of times we try to think of these,
Elaborate schemes. You don't need.
yeah, versus let's just go downtown for a night, like
Yeah.
just for one night, or just get away for a day, or go do some hikes, whatever, like simple things. And I think I've tried to apply like the one-on-one days with my kids, and sometimes I overthink trying to make it too perfect versus just go do it. Like they just want time, right? And I think both relationship and kids, it can be don't overthink it, just go spend time together.
Yeah. And it's funny, there's been multiple times where Christine and I will just we could go literally 20 minutes away to a nice hotel, and we don't tell anybody what we're doing. We're just, hey, we're going away, and it's not nothing elaborate. We just go to a hotel, have a nice dinner, stay one night or two nights, and maybe get room service, whatever it is. But it's just kind of like it's just our time.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be Hawaii or whatever. Nothing. We do fancy things, but it's we don't. I don't overthink it.
yeah, I love it. Um, has there been any like have business and personal, have they conflicted over the years, or how has that been, or how have you thought about that and maybe kept a focus on prioritizing the right things, I guess?
Well, that gets tricky because Christine has been my business partner forever. Um, there were times when the kids were really young and she was just too busy, and I was doing it on my own. But most 98% of our life together and has been us as business partners, and that can be very challenging for a husband and wife being business partners. We have very specific roles. So that really helps to make sure that you have roles, but then it also does bleed into our personal life. So there are times where we may be on a date or we may be away, and all of a sudden, just naturally, we start talking. Oh, we have to get back to this person. Oh, we have to do that. Oh, we have this closing coming up. We make, whatever, and then one of us has to be like, all right, hold on. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Whether it be Sunday or Monday or whatever day it is, we'll get to that. But for right now, let's just focus on us, because that can be very challenging.
Yeah. And then you're also busy, like with businesses and just all the things you have going on, but you're still able to create. I guess it goes back to the lesson you learned very early on, where you're trading time for money as the business owner. You can choose to work, but you also have the flex. You got to get work done. I'm sure you got to get work done, but you have the flexibility as to when that is, so you can allow the time for family too.
It's great. I mean, like, especially with the kids and with, two out of three now are out of high school. But, getting up in the mornings, more recently, when I was heavy into training, I was out the door at 4:45, 5 a.m. Have my first client at either 5 or 5:30 in the morning, because people need to get to you before they go to work, right? So you are a bit enslaved to your time to your clients, but as of like probably the last 4+ years, I've really taken my foot off of the gas pedal. I don't even train clients anymore, actually, but I'm retired from that respect. But I've been able to spend time like breakfast and all that. It's like, all right, I'll hit all these calls at 8:30, not at 6 a.m. or,
Right.
if we're having dinner or we're going out early or whatever, it's like I'll hit that later. So work, as you know, as an entrepreneur, the only day there's no days you don't really do something work wise, but you do have flexibility, which is beautiful.
What has been the impact of being intentional, whether it's with your relationship with your wife, with Christine, or with your kids? Like, what have you seen? What are some cool things maybe you've seen out of that you're like, okay, I think this is from us being so intentional about spending time together, whether that again with Christine or with the kids.
It's interesting. I think with the kids, the intentional time. It just creates an awesome relationship. And there's times where, especially when your kids are young, you're like, you're not like, we're not friends. I'm your dad. you can't speak to me that way. There are times where you have to just lay that down. But, I think a beautiful thing for people to pick up if they really want to work on intentionality with their kids, and I'm sure you already know it. Jim Shields wrote 2 books. One is called 18 Summers, and the other one, I believe the title is The Family Boardroom, or something very close. But if you look up Jim Shields, they're small books full of information. Jimmy and I have been friends, I don't know how long, maybe 7 or 8 years now. He's a great guy. But he's really helped me a lot with those books because you do a family boardroom, quarterly with each kid. And like you said, it doesn't have to be this planned out thing. It's whatever they want. So for example, Caleb, who's 16, is now starting to he really wants to get into boxing and Muay Thai. So, I trained that for the last 18 years, as a coach. So I've been working with him. Yesterday, we spent, an hour or so just working on boxing. I was holding focus mitts for him and teaching him, how to evade, soft defense, hard defense. And then later on, I was like, dude, I'm taking you out to dinner tonight. Where do you want to go? He's like, Franzone's. I don't personally like Franzone's pizza very much, and I don't even eat pizza anymore, but he wants to go to Franzone's. I'm going to go to Franzone's. I'm going to have pizza with him.
Yep.
And then he wanted to play cornhole. We both play cornhole very competitively. So we got into a really, really big tournament last night. There was about 40 some people in that tournament locally. There's some pros even. But we had an absolute blast. It's like I practically spent the whole day with Caleb yesterday.
Yeah. That's awesome. The 18 summers, actually, we were just reflecting like, okay, our kids went to first day of school today. Summer's over, right? Which is like, a blessing and a curse. Like, okay, routine schedule, that's good. But like letting them just enjoy the summer, both in the neighborhood, also with travel, time together. But we were thinking about like, how do we do? Our oldest is an 8th grader. We only have 4 of these left. And really, as she gets older, she's going to be a little bit like she's going to hang out with her friends instead of us and other stuff. So yeah. I think that's important. The other thing I'd say is definitely check out Jim Shields' books. And like the conversations for me, like with the 6-year-old, okay, well, they're not like super deep. They're not very deep conversations, but the importance of building that foundation and expectation that you're going to have some sort of conversations. So then when he's 14, 16, 18, you start to have all kinds of different conversations, but you're early on, I think, building the foundation that allow you to create the space and have this conversation. So I'm a huge fan of it. Not as easy, by the way, when you have 5. So I think your partner has 10 kids. I don't know what the heck he does, and that he would be doing it constantly. But it is a really valuable practice, and I think it just creates the space to have really important conversations because you don't know when you're going to have to be able to have those really important conversations with your kids.
Yeah, and also, it's important to. People talk about, oh, well, you shouldn't talk about money or finances with your kids. And I think that's a really old school mindset. It's important for you to talk about finances with your kids. It's important to include them in your businesses. I mean, since my kids could literally walk, I would take them through demos and construction phases and put little hard top hats on them because they like that too. But, we've taken our kids to closings. We take them through when we're going to look at properties. We try and look at a bunch of properties at once. I remember less than a year ago, I was looking at somebody's portfolio. He had like 17 different properties. It was pouring rain that day. And I took, actually my buddy's son, who wants to be in real estate. And then I took Caleb as well. And we went through these properties in the pouring rain, and, some of them stink and some of them, it's ups and downs. You never know what you're walking into.
Yep.
But it's important because God, we're not going to be around forever. So we have to equip our kids to understand how to run our businesses. God forbid if we're not here.
Right. 100%. And I think when people say like you reference the old school, don't teach them. I think their perception is if you're teaching your kids, you have to be teaching them that money is the most important thing in the world. You're not saying that. You're saying understand money, what money's role is, and how you leverage it and use it. Not because it's the most important thing in the world, but because it can support other things or do other things. It clearly plays a role, right? And the other thing is if you are long-term successful, like if you keep building this real estate portfolio, in 30, 40 years, that could be a pretty big responsibility for somebody that's if they're not equipped that could
Yeah.
become a huge burden. Whereas if they are well equipped for it, they're ready for it, and it's easy, right? So I think starting early with the right balance is important. I agree with that.
Yeah, and we're not like, hey, you guys have to go into real estate or you have to do what we're doing. We're not that at all. We just want them to understand it. You know, if they want, our kids can go into whatever field they want to. We're going to support them for
Yep.
sure. But I just don't want to ever, God forbid, leave and they're like, holy crap, we don't know anything about this.
Yeah, I think teach, train, expose them to things, but it's their choice as to what they want to, what they're going to do. I agree. John, I want to ask how do you give what's your philosophy? How do you give back? How do you serve others?
Yeah, awesome question. Um, So I do want to say that it's easier to write a check than it is. I think it's easier to write a check to charities than it is to actually jump in and give your time. So what should you actually do? Give your time and write a check, right? Um, so Christina and I are involved in quite a few charities. I think there are 5 or 6 kids around the world that we personally sponsor. 3 of which I went on a missions trip eight years ago to East Africa. I spent 3 weeks in Ethiopia and Kenya, and yeah, and it was rough. I mean, we had tents. I'll tell you a funny story. We were in Ethiopia in a really remote place, and we were checking in on a school that our church supports. And there's no hotels anywhere, and they haven't seen uh, anyone of any other color than
Yeah.
black. So, like even myself, everybody we went, my other team, I think there was 5 of us. So 4 of us were pretty white. I'm an in betweener. I'm a brown guy, but they were coming up, rubbing my skin. They thought like something was on our skin
Oh, wow.
and it wasn't the right color. So like it was pretty awesome actually. And we ended up tenting out one night. It was pouring rain. You could hear like animals, and it was an experience. But going on missionary trips is super important because you get to be exposed to other cultures, and that was with Humanity Share. Humanity Share, we sponsor them. Um, they do clean water wells. They sponsor women in education, and they also help communities equip themselves so they won't always need support because that's a big problem with when you give, you're like literally creating someone's need for you versus you helping them up.
Oh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that can be a big hindrance to people. So anyway, so they're Humanity Share is one of them that I've been on, and we support also aerial recovery.
Yeah.
I'm on the board for aerial recovery with Jeremy Locke and Brittany Turner. Great people.
Awesome organization.
Awesome organization. Last year, when we did our Philly regional last September, we raised 45,000 for them in like an hour. It was amazing.
That's
Um, yeah, it's awesome. So they're going to come back. Jeremy's flying back in for the Philly regional in September. I'm picking him up actually from the Philly airport, and we're heading to Renault together. And so he'll speak again. We'll raise money for those guys. And yeah, so I'm a big supporter for aerial recovery. And then our church, Storehouse Church. I sat on the board for 2 years with them. Now my wife sits on the board with them, and I actually sing in the praise and worship band one Sunday a month. So it's a lot of fun. And then we always focus on trying to tithe our money. Whenever the money comes in, it's like, all right, let's get this done right now. Let's get this tithe out so we don't forget about it. Because you get to impact a lot of people.
Yeah, and I love the first thing you talked about, a lot of great organizations there, but it's easier to write a check, but the time, and I think like the trip to Ethiopia and Kenya I think it just gives so much perspective and probably creates a lot of, not just perspective, but therefore gratitude for all the blessings and everything we have too. So I love that. If
Yeah.
John, if you step back and reflect kind of your career, your business, your family life, everything, like how does what you do, how does it make you feel?
Proud, very proud of how I've lived. Obviously, not perfect, made a lot of mistakes, but yeah, I'm very proud of how I've represented myself.
Awesome. What about so if you think through your career, like key factor to success and fulfillment that you've had, what would you say the key factor to success fulfillment has been for you?
I think something that really fills my cup is making an impact on other people. So I think service and impacting other people makes is the biggest difference, and that's what I even talk about at the end of our podcast. I talk about throwing the rock in the water and the ripple effect.
Yeah, I love the ripple effect. Awesome. Kind of closing question, and I want to hear more about how our listeners can find out more about you. But what has been the most impactful book that you have read, and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've read a lot. I mean, everybody's going to say the purple one, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's pretty amazing. Also going to go old school. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't think that one's talked enough about anymore. That is a monster book. And then Matthew Kelly writes some great books.
Oh man, Matthew Kelly's awesome.
I highly recommend Matthew Kelly. Obviously, John Maxwell books. Love John Maxwell. I went to a 4-day conference that he did when I was in college, and he made a monster impact on me. So, yeah, so those are some authors, some books, but I don't know about there's one. I mean, obviously the Bible, people would say that, but, that goes without saying.
100%. And those, I mean, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Maxwell, Kiyosaki, all phenomenal books. So awesome, John. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I mean, just the different perspective on business, kind of your approach, the knowledge you gained early, the knowledge, experience, courage you gained in sales, taking the steps, your kind of real estate story, the not just the tips and tricks, but more importantly, the clear prioritization you have put on your family, your relationship with your wife and your kids. I really appreciate, and just kind of speaking that to our listeners to hopefully help all of us prioritize that a little bit more than we are today, right? Because we always can work on it. So just a lot of wisdom throughout. So I really appreciate it. How can our listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, they can. You guys can connect with me on Instagram. It's Strength Personal Training. That's probably going to disappear. So just look up John Edwin, JOHN EDWIN. I am on Facebook as well. I'm very active there. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I don't mess with LinkedIn too often. It's just too much solicitation. I feel overwhelmed when I get on LinkedIn. So that's not a great place to connect with me. But those other two sources, Instagram and Facebook, that's perfect.
Awesome, John. And I really appreciate it. I look forward to syncing up schedules again to get on your podcast. I appreciate the invite, and this has been great. It's been great just to connect again and get to know you a little bit more. So, John, thanks so much for coming on the show. Very grateful. For the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.